I'm going to talk about what's going on as far as Trump and his tariffs and the legal battle. But first, let's talk about California and what's going on with the ports, all because of Trump's tariffs and Trump's trade war. All right, so this is an article from Cal Matters, a nonprofit that talks about California matters. Trump trade war has already had a huge effect on California ports. And let's remember, California is a productive state. California has a GDP that is fourth in the globe as far as being bigger than other countries, California alone. So if this impacts California, this is going to impact the rest of the country. California's port traffic is beginning to look worse now under Trump's fickle tariff policy than it did at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. The vessel calls or cancellations that we're seeing today are starting to exceed the number we saw in COVID-19. Mario Cordero, chief executive of the Port of Long Beach, said in an interview with Cal Matters in early May. At Port of Los Angeles, Executive Director Gene Soroka said during a media briefing last week that the port expected 80 ships to arrive in May, but 17 have been canceled. By comparison, last year through May, there were a total of 12 cancellations. There are 10 cancellations for June already, he added. Farther north, the Port of Oakland saw a 15% month-over-month drop in container activity in April, spokesperson Matt Davis said. It was the first significant decline this year as tariffs went into effect. The challenges presented by Trump's tariffs are not like COVID, said Martha Miller, executive director of the California Association of Port Authorities, at a business roundtable last week. The unpredictability of Trump's edicts means there won't be a surge of cargo, she said. Many businesses are waiting to act, including to order goods for import. Late Wednesday, a federal court struck down most of Trump's tariffs, ruling that he did not have the authority to impose them under the emergency authority his administration has cited. The court's decision in a lawsuit brought by 12 states, led by Oregon and 5 businesses, brings fresh uncertainty with the administration likely to appeal, though a spokesperson did not say when it would do so when contacted by Cal Matters Thursday. California, which filed a similar but separate lawsuit against the administration over tariffs, had filed an amicus brief supporting Oregon's suit. Data for the state's 3 biggest ports confirmed that jobs are dwindling for longshore workers up and down the state. The number of gangs, teams of varied sizes that work to handle cargo at each of the ports have declined in the past few weeks and have dropped year over year. Besides the numbers of containers at the ports, gang numbers are another indicator of the amount of work available. Gary Herrera is president of the International Longshore's Workers Union, Local 13, which represents port workers in both Long Beach and Los Angeles. Part-time workers are not getting any answers right now, Herrera said during a media briefing with Long Beach officials. He told Cal Matters that full-time workers who get first dibs on jobs may not be getting 40 hours a week either. Herrera was also speaking on behalf of a couple other locals. Altogether, they represent about 9,000 full-time and 6,000 part-time port workers. As the tariff drama drags on, the impact will be felt by other workers along the supply chain, from truck drivers to the staff at warehouses to rail workers and those who work in retail. If and when people don't have enough work or lose their jobs, their communities and local economies will suffer, port officials and workers say. So I highlighted this to say that this is going to have an impact. It's going to start in California. It's going to start at these individual ports, and then it's going to broaden into the wider community, and then it's going to broaden more into the country. This is going to have it's not even a ripple effect. It's going to be a tsunami effect because it's going to go through the rest of the country. It's just going to touch the port communities first. I skipped some of the article, but I'm starting right here. When there's no work for longshoremen, there's very little work for us except gate monitoring. It's heartbreaking. It's putting people out of work. Truckers are also feeling the squeeze from the tariffs. Eric Tate is the secretary-treasurer of Teamsters Local 848, which represents about 8,000 truck drivers in Southern California. He said truckers, especially part-timers, aren't guaranteed any hours, are seeing less work, though he did say truckers saw a bit of a pickup in work after Trump temporarily reduced tariffs on China. So this is impacting lots of people. This is impacting households, especially at a time where tariffs are driving up cost of everything. This is going to cause a contraction of the economy. So that is what's going on in California. And like I said, this is going to cause a ripple effect. Let's talk about some of the things that are going on in the court right now. This is an article from the BBC. Trump tariffs can stay in place for now, appeal court rules. So it right now is still in the hands of the court. Trump can keep collecting import taxes for now, an appeals court has said, a day after a trade ruling found the bulk of his global tariffs to be illegal. A federal appeals court granted a bid from the White House to temporarily suspend the lower court's order, which ruled that Trump had overstepped his powers by imposing the duties. Wednesday's judgment from the U.S. Court of International Trade drew the ire of Trump officials who called it an example of judicial overreach. Small businesses and a group of states had challenged the measures which are at the heart of Trump's agenda and have shaken the whole world's economy. In its appeal, the Trump administration said the decision issued by the trade court a day earlier had improperly second-guessed the president and threatened to unravel months of hard-fought trade negotiations. The political branches, not courts, make foreign policy and chart economic policy, it said in the filing. Shortly before Thursday's tariff reprieve from the appeals court, the White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt told a press briefing, America cannot function if President Trump or any other president for that matter has their sensitive diplomatic or trade negotiations railroaded by activist judges. But that's where it's all about balance. There needs to be checks and balances, and they think that they can just overrule everything, and he is a king. He is not a king. He gets checked when he oversteps. Wednesday's ruling by the little-known trade court in New York would void tariffs imposed by Trump in February on goods from China, Mexico, and Canada, which he justified as a move intended to address a fentanyl smuggling. The lower court's decision would also dismiss a blanket 10% import tax that Trump unveiled last month on goods from countries around the world, together with higher so-called reciprocal tariffs on trade partners, including the EU and China. The 1977 law Trump invoked to impose many of the tariffs, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, did not allow for such sweeping levies, the lower court said. But its ruling did not affect Trump's tariffs on cars, steel, and aluminum, which were implemented under another law. The White House has suspended or revised parts of many of its duties while trade negotiations grind on, but the appeals court decision allowed the tariffs to be used for now while the case is litigated. The next hearing is on June 5th, next week. Another federal court overseeing a separate tariffs case reached a similar conclusion on Thursday to the trade court. Judge Rudolph Contreras found the duties went beyond the president's authority, but the ruling only applied to a toy company in the case. All right, y'all. So obviously we have to wait till June 5th. This man is creating policy, but is he overstepping his boundaries? Is he overstepping his authority to do so? We will see when the courts rule on this. Hopefully he gets put back in his place. Let me know what you think about this one. Have you seen all of these memes going around about Trump and taco, and you're wondering what is going on? Well, let's taco about it. Get it? Taco? All right, so let's talk about the origins of taco. How a columnist catchphrase caused an Oval Office stir. At a press conference Wednesday, Trump had a very unhappy reaction to being asked about taco trade, which is shorthand for Trump always chickens out. They actually asked him about this at a press conference, and he was peeved. I'm going to show you audio where they're having this discussion about what taco stands for. And I know that this is getting under his skin. And so as someone who is an anti-Trump person, we're going to continue to talk about taco. Trump always chickens out. Why it matters. Traders have been using taco to describe the belief that the president will back off a big tariff threat if the markets sink in response. It happened after Liberation Day, aka Liberated from Their Money Day, and more recently last weekend when the president threatened 50% tariffs on the EU. The market dropped, only to recover after the president said he'd give the EU more time to negotiate. Taco is a catchier version of what Wall Street had been calling the Trump put, which investors relied on in the president's first term. A state of play, Trump was asked about the spate of taco-related headlines while taking questions in the Oval Office Wednesday. And I'm definitely going to share that video.
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country. And because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out?
But let's look at where it originated from. Let's give credit where credit is due. Financial Times columnist Robert Armstrong felt some dread about the whole thing, he told Axios later in the day. Armstrong, who writes for Financial Times' Unhinged newsletter, came up with the term taco a few months ago. I needed a shorthand way in my newsletter to describe this pattern because it was an important pattern in markets, and perhaps I was hungry too. So I came up with the acronym TACO. It didn't take off at first. It was definitely not becoming a thing, but I kept using it because it had utility for me. And then it sort of started to appear in brokers' notes, and people started mentioning it to me, and then it shows up in the New York Times headlines, and today someone is posing the question to the president. So we have to give credit where credit is due. Okay, here we have Taco Don. He's looking like a petulant child. Here we have Tariff, Tariff, Tariff. He's singing a song, holding a banjo in a taco shell. And then we have Swag on Skinny saying, taco is pretty funny, I must admit. I was sold on Orange Head D-Face, but I might have to make some minor tweaks. Let me know, have you seen these memes all over the place? Let me know which one is the funniest to you. Join the conversation and continue to share. It gets underneath his skin. It rankles him. So let's continue to do that because he deserves it for what he's doing to the economy.
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country. And because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out? I kick out?